Morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining the Minority Women Lead series final conversation, bringing women of color to the table. I'm Fong Kushida, and I'm President and CEO of the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our chamber and our board of directors, I would like to thank all of you, whether this is your first conversation or your fourth, for participating in this year's month-long Minority Women Lead campaign. While this year has been a departure from our usual physical conference in Silicon Valley, it has been a pleasure hosting this virtual series together to inspire and uplift professional women of color across the country with our partners National ACE and the Minority Business Development Agency. Now, throughout this campaign, we've heard from a variety of powerful women, such as Congresswoman Judy Chu, Tracy Doi, the CFO of Toyota, and many, many more. We learned about the importance of mentoring other women of color and how to be a good mentee. We've learned what it takes to lead through change as a woman of color, and we've heard the inspiring stories of women who have climbed up the ladder to lead their organizations and communities to success. Today, we'll hear from 6 brilliant women as they share the work they've done to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion within companies and institutions. You can read about their bios in the digital program that we've linked in the Zoom chat. Before we get into our program, I would like to remind you all to visit our website, minoritywomenlead.com, to watch past conversations and read the stories and insights from other successful women of color. For those of you on social media, you can engage with our campaign and post your own stories by using the hashtag MinorityWomenLead. So now I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank all of our sponsors. Without these sponsors, we could not have been able to put this campaign and conversation series together. So our event sponsors, thank you to Wells Fargo and Southwest. Our silver sponsors, thank you to Coca-Cola Company, Comcast, Postmates, and Union Bank. And our bronze sponsors, thank you to Lyft and Siemens Mobility, Inc. Now, at the end of our panel discussion, we will be selecting a winner to receive 1 round-trip Southwest Airline e-pass. The winner will be selected at random from our list of registered attendees, and you must be present to win. You must be present to win. So now I'd like to turn it over to my good friend, Ms. Sheryl Tong, President and CEO of National ACE. Sheryl?
Pat, thank you so much, and I really appreciate your leadership. CalAsian Chamber has done tremendous work, and we're just very, very proud of you as our partner. The Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce Entrepreneurship, we call National ACE. We represent the business interests of Asian American and Pacific Islanders and to improve their economic and social well-being. Since the pandemic, National ACE has worked with policymakers, business leaders, and private pocket sector stakeholders to advocate for public policy that we hope to help AAPI business. AAPI business has been hurt dramatically, and minority business has been hurt dramatically. So we really want to use this opportunity to help the minority business. And we are so proud that we have so many good leaders with us today, and they are going to share how we survive and how we can be successful during this challenging times. Now I would like to introduce you Susan Jean Davis. She's going to give us a welcoming remarks. Susan Jean Davis is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Comcast NBCUniversal. Susan is a trailblazer, and she is willing to take risk and go in a path that Asian American women or minority women are already there. She has more than 25 years of experience in the communication and technology industry. In this role, she is responsible for identifying sustainable strategy and priority and for implementing the company's sustainability program across all the Comcast, NBCUniversal business units and the functions. And due to her tremendous accomplishment, Susan has been named one of the most powerful women in cable and one of the most influential minorities in cable by Cable Facts for many years. Susan's heart is always the minority community and always pay back to our community. In 2011, Susan negotiated a historical memorandum of understanding between Comcast and the Asian American community as a part of a company's merge with NBCUniversal that created groundbreaking commitments in the areas of programming, supplier, employment diversity, and community involvement. Susan served as the chair of the board of the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, and also she is the vice chair of the National ACE. Susan Jean Davis. Susan.
It's such a pleasure to greet you today, 1 year from when I was honored to be your keynote speaker. Oh, how the world has changed since then. Thank you, ACE, Chiling, the CalAsian Chamber, and Pat for inviting me back to introduce today's session. On this 57th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, we know that there has been so much progress, but we also know that there is still so much more work to do to move towards Dr. King's dream of having character rather than color be the judge of our identity and value. The recent events in Kenosha validate that color remains a driver in how we treat one another, how we judge one another, and how we live amongst one another. The AAPI community knows this all too well in terms of our long history in this country, where we have seen racism, bigotry, and prejudice. Recent events naming COVID-19 the China virus has unleashed a spike in violence, discrimination, and bad behavior towards us. As one AAPI friend recently said to me, "We are all Chinese now, Susan." This does not have to be. This should not be. Words matter. History matters. Leadership matters. Black lives matter. And while women have seen strides in every area of leadership, women of color lag behind white women. There's more to be done to address unconscious bias that holds us back from bringing our full selves to the table, to be unified against racism, to equalize opportunities, to empower people and communities. We women of color need to seize the day, not be afraid, not hesitate, not doubt ourselves, and lead, because we deserve to be here. We belong here at the head table, and we need to lift others behind us. I look forward to working with you all to bring more of us to the forefront. Now, it is my honor to introduce today's conversation, Bringing Women of Color to the Table. Today's moderator is Sarah Prince, partner at McKinsey & Company. She is the partner lead for Growth Accelerate, McKinsey's approach to building client commercial capabilities, and has also published works on why diversity matters, which makes her a great lead for today's discussion. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sarah Prince.
Hello, everyone. I am so delighted to join this conversation and really just thank everyone for hosting this opportunity. I have the tremendous honor of facilitating a conversation amongst 5 powerful, dynamic women who certainly, as we think about the opportunities around women of color being leaders and their voice being heard, demonstrate why that is so incredibly beneficial to the organizations that we all serve, but also just to the communities that we all operate in more broadly. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Rachel Cooke, who is the Deputy Director of Communications for the Sheryl, Sandberg, and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation. Lisa Lee, who is the VP of Global Culture, Belonging, and People Growth for DoorDash. Monica Poindexter, who's the Head of Inclusion and Diversity and Employee Relations at Lyft. Mandy Price, who's the CEO of Canaries. And Melisa Thomas Hunt, who is the Head of Global Diversity and Belonging at Airbnb. And welcome, everyone, to this conversation.
Great. Thank you.
All right, let's jump in with the questions, because that's the exciting part, which is to listen to everybody's lessons learned and experiences. And I'd love to maybe just start with where we are at this precise moment in time. It is just this interesting dynamic of being in the midst of two crises, two pandemics. And I'd be curious to know, how has this impacted each of you both personally and professionally as a leader?
So I'll kick it off, Sarah, if there's not directed to any one of us. When I think of the time right now, I think of being, feeling exhausted and exhilarated at the same time. This, especially I think for all of us that do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it's been a lot of work. Everyone I know is drinking from a fire hose. But at the same time, to see the commitment that people are having to these issues. I know for a long time, I felt like I was speaking a different language sometimes when I would speak to people about especially equity and inclusion issues. I think people get diversity, but when we would talk about, looking at these issues from a systemic and institutional lens, people just weren't really there, right? And so now to hear people talking about anti-racism and to want to be an anti-racist company is very, very motivating. And from a personal side, I think we're all struggling, right? I know me, I'm a mom, and so I struggle to not only navigate everything that's going on with work, especially with work being, like I said, drinking from the fire hose, but also being, the teacher. I'm a teacher, I'm a chef, I'm all these other things now that I was not typically doing. And I think it's given me a great perspective, and I'm sure most of us on the panel, as far as the challenges that our employees are facing as well. So as we think about not only how do we make the workplace more equitable, inclusive, but how are we also ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our employees during this very difficult and challenging time for them.
I hope
Thank you for that, Mandy.
that I absolutely agree with all that Mandy had said. I think for all of us who do DE&I work, it's an interesting position to do the work and also be the work. And I heard like my friend Katrina Jones say that. And it's a complicated intersection. I don't think any of us are going to lie that it's hard to navigate talking about, say, microaggressions or hiring and promotions when we ourselves have been impacted by those very things and these very systems that we're trying to dismantle. And then I think the interesting thing about DE&I work is that so much of it is led by people of color. And I think we should examine that as well. Why is it that people of color have been leading the charge on this? Where are our non-sort of Black or non-people of color colleagues in leading the charge as well? Because this isn't just a responsibility of people of color to solve these issues.
And to that point, Rachel, also men too, right, in the DEI space. I'll just add that, for those of us who are lucky to have a team, definitely the exhaustion has also come from being there for members of our team. I would imagine that for a lot of us, this is not our first go around at experiencing the energy that is coming our way, and being in the strategic roles that we're in, we have to figure out what to do with that energy and put it in a productive place without being swept up in it. And at the same time, be the role model for your team to help them deal with that exhaustion, which can be so tough. Because, you know, I have folks on my team that are pessimistic and skeptical, and they are the ones that have to continue to move the work forward. So how do we demonstrate our own vulnerability and say, you know what, I have times when I'm lying on the carpet eating, you know, a whole gallon of ice cream myself, because you're right. I don't know if things will get better. But here's what I do know. And having to be that voice sometimes when you're questioning everything can be really tough.
Lisa, I just wanted to pick up on that a little bit, the notion of the team and supporting our teams. One of the things that I've tried to cascade internally is that when it's quiet with regard to issues of DEI within the company, it's because my team has been doing its work and they're exhausted. Like the relationships, the conversations, the catching and holding and supporting and uplifting people. It's hard to figure out how do you recognize the absence of employees being discontent with where the company is, because they're rarely saying you're doing a phenomenal job, but when it's quiet, it actually means that my team is doing a phenomenal job.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll add that this time has actually caused all of us in this role to be able to help to humanize the conversation and to humanize the experience of people of color. And when we think about the role of being able to humanize the work that is oftentimes counted as a demographic perspective, as numbers, as percentages, these experiences are causing leaders to really have to focus on the empathy, the inclusion, and exercise muscles. And I think that the roles that we play as inclusion and diversity subject matter experts, it's humanizing it, but also really helping the organization. How do we actually move through it? So that as we move through it, we're bringing the organization, bringing our teams along, but we're also focusing on the work that matters most. And yes, that is exhausting, but it's also, for some companies, breaking ground in uncharted territories and having conversations that haven't been had before. And that's our role.
I hear. No, you know, it's certainly so many dimensions that each of us are getting pulled on in this moment, and that dynamic of exhilarated and exhausted, I think certainly resonated amongst the group. I'm curious, particularly on the exhilarated part of the spectrum, does that mean in this moment that folks have real hope that things will get better, that this is a particular moment in time? Do you have hope that it's going to get better? If so, what gives you that hope? If not, you know, what's holding you back?
I'll pick up where I left off at, is that we're having conversations and igniting conversations, call to action, new levels of commitment inside the organization. And we're also seeing leaders doing things very differently or doing things that they have not done and leaned into their own levels of uncomfortability. And from that, I do see that we're actually breaking into new ground, and we're also seeing new initiatives being launched across the organization. And that gives us hope, but it's also bringing more people into the conversation to actually drive action, to drive work, to launch and initiate new programs that perhaps maybe a year, even 6 months ago, it may have been a little harder to actually get it off the ground. So it does bring me hope, and give me hope that a lot of the things that we may have seen some pause on were actually being elevated, and it's being pushed forward, not just by the diversity and equity inclusion teams, but it's actually being pushed forward by the organization, by the leaders, by the employees at every single level across the organization. So that does give me hope.
I would add that, oh, I'm sorry, Mandy, please go ahead. Oh, thank you. I would say that, you know, being a person of color, I think the story of people of color is that you have to have hope, right? We face so much challenges and barriers, and I think we all know that the only way through a situation is forward, and that there really is no going back. And that always gives me hope that things can change. But I also think we're in a moment where companies and leaders are being held accountable, whether it's from their employees, whether it's from customers. I think now is a really interesting time where, as Monica said, people are matching hope with action. So much of the story of people of color at work, and especially Black women at work, are Black women sort of falling through the gaps in corporate America that corporate America has been unwilling to see or recognize, let alone measure. And now I think for a lot of us, we're seeing corporate America really taking a stance and measuring these issues, whether it's the pay gap, whether we're talking about hiring and promotions, whether we're talking about workplace culture and creating an inclusive environment. All of these dimensions are things that deeply impact the experiences of people of color at work. And I think we're all seeing sort of renewed vigor and an actual business priority to measure these issues and really address them.
I'm hopeful, optimistic for all the reasons mentioned. I think it's important for us to continue to keep front and center that this is really hard work, that we have to be persistent, that we need all of the enthusiasm, exuberance to show up sort of day in, day out, and for us not to lose momentum.
Mandy, do you want to go? I think you had something to share.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for a lot of the reasons that everyone just spoke about. And I think what we've seen is the nature of the conversation change. And I think, even when we look back saying not only, I know Monica said things that can happen 6 months or a year ago, I would say even, what we saw during COVID, which was DEI professionals being laid off and DEI budgets being slashed. And so I think, when things got rough, we saw that, we were the first on the chopping block. And I think what we're seeing now is, given obviously everything that's going on, people understanding the importance of the work, and that this is something that has to be ingrained within every single level of the organization. It has to be part of the business strategy. And what gives me hope is seeing that this conversation has moved from kind of simply talent acquisition or kind of the idea that it's a pipeline issue, to understanding that we have to ensure within our organization that we are producing an inclusive and equitable environment so that we can actually keep talent, because I think most of us in the space know that that has been the issue for a long time, is that the focus has been on the numbers and diversity. And so we see this constant churn of where we're getting talent, but the talent doesn't stay because of kind of the structures and the systems that are set up within the organization. So I'm hopeful that the conversations and the focus has started to really hone in on the experience, the everyday lived experience that underrepresented groups have within the workplace, and a focus on ensuring that we're actually creating a workplace that's fair and equitable.
All right. So I hear hope, which is reassuring, but we also had this point of exhausted. It is from knowing your backgrounds, knowing what each of you are accomplishing, knowing the statistics and the data that says the likelihood of any of us having a seat at the table is exceptionally low given the dynamics that we're facing, and that the accomplishments there, just without artifice, are in fact superhuman that each of you have done. We are in fact all still very human. So what do you do in the midst of that exhaustion to sustain your energy, to rebuild your energy, to find that source of renewal that allows you to lean into these moments that so desperately call for your leadership?
I'm happy to start.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Monica. Let's see. To be frank, I think this one is really, really tough. I myself have been working, incredibly long hours for the last couple of weeks, and I just feel like I'm in this holding pattern every single week. I'm like, I just need to get through this week, and next week is going to be better. So I really have to draw better boundaries for myself, and I think that starts with, at least for me, demonstrating some vulnerability with my own team and say, hey, y'all, I need your help. I need your help in the sense that, I can't be the person that continues to be everywhere in every project, coming to every single meeting with you. But like, we're going to still work together, and this is how we're going to work together, right? So that's one very tactical way to be able to make your calendars a little bit more manageable. But outside of that, just finding time to be with people that you love. I, am very lucky that I live close to my sister, my siblings. They're in my germ bubble. So, we're able to, still see each other. Finding time, with friends, whether it's check-in calls or for those that can handle it, Zoom connect. I personally don't need any more Zoom conversations, but the phone is nice. And actually, I've started to take meetings while walking around my neighborhood. So I'll ask people, hey, is it okay if we don't do a Zoom call? If you don't have a deck or a document to show me, can I take you for a walk? And people actually really love that. Going on hikes, nature, is always really good for myself. And, my father passed away last year, and actually finding the time to be with him and visit him, and even just in the moments of quietness, to reflect, on his life and the lessons that he has taught me, has been so incredibly grounding for me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Sorry to hear about your father. One of the things that I'll share is giving ourselves permission to have some space and some grace. I think is so important, as well as what I'm learning, and it's I'll say I'm recovering and still trying to work at it, which is delegating. I'm seeing some head nods, but in the moments where we are in crisis, or in the moments where there's chaos, as Lisa said, we're usually the go-to people in our organization. But how can we actually help to scale out some of the responsibilities to our teams? And when those chaos moments happen, not only do we be the ones to actually help to respond, but you also bring along your team members so that they can also help to experience what is that crisis mode like? What is that rapid response team like? So that it's not if, but when the next crisis comes up, you don't have to always be the first person that the team or leadership team comes to, is that they will actually see that when the last crisis happened, that you actually brought someone else along to be able to help to share some of that rapid response activities. So I think that's important. And the other thing that I have actually started to do more of is to ask for what I need in the moments that I need it. Oftentimes we as women of color, we try to take on so much. We try to be the Sheryls in every situation, and also think that our strength comes from not asking for what we need. And after you've been broken down a few times, you realize, well, you know what, as I look around, everybody else has all these other resources. Why am I trying to be superwoman in this situation? It's not about that. And so my mom has always told me that a closed mouth does not get fed. And so I have realized in these moments that when I need something, I say something and I ask for what I need. And it's amazing what response you get, not only from your colleagues to what Lisa has said, but also from leaders across the organization.
Any others have wonderful things they're doing to find the energy to keep going week after week?
I need to do more as far as, ensuring wellness and ensuring that there's not that burnout. To be frank, I'm terrified of when the energy and focus is going to dissipate on these issues. So what has been keeping me going and keeping our team going is, okay, people are listening, they're paying attention. We have to work as hard as we can right now because we don't know how long that's going to last. And I know that it's important that we take that time, but unfortunately, we've seen the attention go away from these issues so quickly that there is a sense of urgency of how we have to get the work done while people are dedicating, the resources to it and are paying attention.
Mandy, picking up maybe just on that last point of how quickly the attention shifts and how that has happened repeatedly over time. I mean, we are in this moment, confronted by the continued and intense presence and impact of racism, the daily manifestation of bias and microaggressions and all sorts of dimensions. And at this very same time, we have a woman of color in contention for vice president of our country. What does that mean to each of you personally, and then as you think about it, maybe more broadly to women of color?
Yeah, if I can jump in there, I think, you know, whether or not Kamala was your candidate at the beginning or now, I think we can't ignore the historic nature of seeing a woman of color with so many complex and beautiful identities, sort of the possibility of representing so many people. You know, the interesting thing I think about Kamala was, you know, especially as it relates to Black women, is how early on that she was dinged for being so ambitious, right? That she was seeking too much, that she was asking for too much by looking for the presidency and then looking for the vice presidency. And what I have been telling so many people is that Black women are ambitious, right? We are ambitious. We know how to go after things, especially in a world that tells us that we can't have them. 41% of Black women are more ambitious than white women, and they're ambitious for the right reasons. 50% of Black women who are ambitious want to do so because they want to do better for their companies and they want to be role models for people who are like them. Those are the types of leaders that we, I think, should support and sort of rally behind, obviously holding them accountable, but I think it just shows that there should be no limit to ambition from women of color at all, that we should always double down and invest in sort of the ambition of Black women, because I think, and women of color, because I think it leads us in the right direction.
I think the thing that I'll add there is definitely recognizing how historic it is. And one thing that is very top of mind for me is avoiding tokenism, not sort of pointing to one person as, well, this is the example of how we have solved the problem. And it's actually been a pretty interesting concept that we teach in one of our inclusive leadership courses at DoorDash, that usually, you know, people think they know. So what we do is we really take it back to the fundamentals, you know, in class 1. You know, we show a bunch of words and allow people the safe space to say, you know, point out just one thing that you may not know the definition to, and that's okay, right? And I know we're in this space all the time. We talk about, I think it was Mandy who talked about using words, and people are looking at you like you have two heads, you know, whether it's intersectionality or tokenism or xenophobia, right? These are things that no adult is ever going to tell you they don't know what that means. But then when you really like unpack it in a place that feels safe, people are like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. You know, I didn't realize that every time I pointed to this one woman in the workplace, I was exercising tokenism. So that's something that I'm very mindful of, like definitely how we can continue to show that we're taking steps towards progress. And, you know, I am a believer that slow and steady wins the race, you know, that we got to keep going and make sure that there are even more women of color, Black women, you know, having a seat at the table, because that's not currently still the case.
I'll just add that, I mean, for me, seeing her at the Democratic National Convention last week, it was a sense of pride. And to know that there was the hope for the future, and to know that other young Black women, young Black girls can actually see another Black woman on stage in leadership and in a role to be able to speak truth to power. And if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, I feel very good to know that there are future generations, and Kamala will be the next one to be able to help to establish and break some of that ground in the White House, as Barack Obama has already done. So very hopeful.
I think it was really inspiring, and I'm so excited about her candidacy and her role on the ticket. But I think at the same time, what we saw is the sexist and the racist tropes come out immediately, right? People kind of just, okay, she's a woman of color, and then immediately we see kind of all these disparaging remarks around her, around those things that are her identity. And I think we all know that there's a lot of work to be done, not only within the workplace, but within our country, for that to be the first, the immediate thing that people do to attack her.
It's just a reminder to me that we have to think about not only how do we bring people into the organization, but how do we move them through to the highest levels of organization, because that becomes the sort of pinnacle and the visible point of it. And so to the point about children, you know, specifically brown, Black children, children of color, but all children being able to see this level of representation creates a world you know, that they can aspire to. This is the world that they now know. This is the world that they now expect. And for me, that's incredibly powerful.
Maybe picking up on that, and Monica, the point that you made on truth to power, each of you is in a leadership position that carries its own level of power. How are you leveraging your passion and power with purpose? What is your responsibility in this moment?
I've found myself on several occasions having to move myself out the way first. And when you think about what that means, it truly is being the one that if I can't move myself out the way to address certain issues or to influence or to push the boundaries or to advocate or to ask for what's needed or to really be very clear on what we should do or communicate that, then how can I expect the leader to do the things that I'm asking he or she to be able to do? So first I had to start with me and challenge myself first. And so once I have done that, it actually helps me to be able to demonstrate and model that empathy that I need other leaders to be able to follow and model as well. But what I have found is that by having the conversation, by asking for what is needed, by actually meeting the leaders where they are at and letting them know that I'm not looking for you to have all the answers, but I would like for you to be able to listen and to be open and to allow ourselves to be able to figure out how do we respond collectively, responsibly, and how is it going to actually reflect the values of the organization. And when I have found that when I start with me first, that has actually opened up a gateway or the roadmap to be able to have future conversations. But not only that, to be able to drive the change that needs to happen in an organization. And when people know that you have a purpose and you have a passion and you have a mission, but you can execute, it doesn't take a title to lead. It takes all of that to be able to demonstrate that you can actually influence change and activate it in the moments that matter.
Incredibly well said. Any other adds to that one?
So when I think about, you know, the position that I am, being the CEO of Canaries, and just look at my trajectory to get here, right? I was a lawyer. I was in the corporate space representing private equity firms for many years and was a partner at a firm. And my path is really the path that a lot of Black women have done, which is leaving the corporate world to become an entrepreneur. When we look at the barriers that exist, a lot of Black women feel that there's not a space for them there. You know, we've had Ursula Burns, which is great, but there hasn't been too many others. And so what we see is a large percentage of Black women going into entrepreneurism or to other fields where they feel like they have more control of their careers and of their destiny. But, you know, as we look as far as what is the responsibility that we each have, especially during this time with this work, you know, Canaries, we help organizations measure equity and inclusion, elevate their workplaces. I think we feel like we have a tremendous responsibility during this time, and one of the things that we take very seriously. So I think when we look at the abilities that we all have, I think sometimes people feel like if they're not in leadership, they don't have a place, that they don't have a way to elevate these issues within their workplace. But I think what we've all seen, and the reason why we've seen such movement within the last few weeks, I guess it's been almost months now, is because everyone was collectively using their voice. And so I would just encourage everyone to know that this is going to take all of us. I think Melissa said it earlier, that this is hard work. It's not something that is going to be changed overnight. But we have to make sure that we continue to keep the focus on these issues and to keep the accountability there.
Mandy, you just challenged, that there's actually a role and a responsibility for everyone in this. I was curious, sort of in that frame, there's clear we all feel a sense of deep responsibility in this moment and to leverage the opportunity that we have in order to push it. But what isn't your responsibility? What isn't, as a leader in your organization and a woman of color, what's not your job? What's someone else's role?
So Sarah, just to make sure I understand. So you're saying as a just employee, what can they do to help elevate these issues?
No, I mean, for those of us here, what part of this isn't on our shoulders to carry? Like, where are we looking for others to jump in and help push some of this forward?
Well, I can't remember who on the panel said it earlier. I think several people have said it, but I think it's not the job of women to fix gender issues. It's not the job of people of color to fix racism. I think this is everyone's responsibility. And when I say everyone, I don't mean just employees of color or underrepresented employees. I think everyone is responsible and everyone is required to fix these issues. And I think when we see, only people of color doing diversity and inclusion work, when we see only women involved in the Women's Task Force, that's an issue. And I think for too long, that's become, we've normalized that behavior. And I think we have to speak up and say, everyone is involved. Everyone has to be at the table to ensure that these issues are addressed. And I think that we have to ensure that we are demanding that.
I'll add to that to say that not only are we don't need to fix it, but we're also not the cleanup women. As women of color, we are not the cleanup women. We are the women that actually should be the ones that are actually helping to set the strategy, influence the change, help with the communication, and also help with the execution. But we are not the cleanup women. And so I think that oftentimes we fall into that situation because of bad decisions, because we were not involved in the conversations, because we were not involved in the strategies or in the rollout or how things were actually positioned. So I think sometimes, unfortunately, organizations will get themselves out there, and it's not until actually do they fall or fail, do they actually realize the value of having people of color, women of color, of having diversity, of having a different voice or a different perspective involved in the strategy making or rollout of efforts or initiatives. And so I think it's incumbent upon us that we have to really hold ourselves even to even a higher standard, that even when we're asked to be able to help out, at what point are you asking me to help out? Is it after the fact, or is it a part of the strategy? And if it's after the fact, then it's up to us to be able to say, going forward, let's be sure that you can engage me in on the front end so that we can actually help with the execution of how things land on the back end.
I think
Thank
Mandy
you for that.
And Monica said it so beautifully that it's definitely a collective effort. I think the true sort of mark of a good D&I sort of program in any company is that if any one of us left that role, that work should still continue. The work should not fail if any one of us were to leave. And if that is the case, then that means that your company hasn't done the true collective investment and really thought about what D&I means for your company and set your priorities accordingly. And I think that's a real true marker of success in our work.
Absolutely.
So, and I could spend another couple hours just asking you questions, but we've got some questions from the audience, so I want to make sure we pull those in. We've got one here, and maybe that just picks up a little bit on where we've just been talking, which is, do any of you see within your companies that CEOs and boards are making the commitment and taking steps to diversify the C-suite level and beyond? Obviously, Mandy, within your organization, yes, but within other organizations, are folks seeing that push to bring greater levels of diversity at the top levels of the organization?
It's certainly an ongoing conversation for us at Airbnb. About a month ago, we made a commitment to end of 2021 aggregate goals for our executive team and board that it would be 20% people of color. So it's a starting point.
I'll say for us at Lyft, our executive team, they've actually have agreed and have actually launched a 9-month sponsorship program for all Black Latinx directors and above. And so for that to be able to come at the CEO, COO level and their executive leadership team, that's a demonstrated commitment that we have. And then for the rest of the year, we've also committed to ensure that every Black and Latinx employee at Lyft will have the opportunity to have a mentor or a sponsor, depending upon their level in the organization. So we have definitely put that commitment out there to the organization around advancement, retention, and development, so that we have that pipeline, but also ensuring that we're sending a very clear message to our directors and above that we want to ensure that there's opportunities for promotion and advancement at Lyft.
Yeah, I'll say we're having very similar conversations and commitments to similar types of programs. Definitely, board of directors as well. So that's been really good to see. Because usually I would say, folks in our position, sometimes, the board of directors search is a bit of a black box. But it's not absence, in the critical conversations that we have to be a part of as well. So we're definitely seeing those commitments, and also I think executives are now seeing too, like the uniqueness in the role that they can and should play, versus a, give me a menu style of everything that you're doing, and what I can say about your programs, right? It's like, okay, what role and specific influencing powers that I have to then go and make those things happen, whether it's the skip level conversations, whether it's the sponsorship or mentoring that needs to happen. I think our executives are understanding they need to vote with their time and actually put themselves in the seats of positions that we're usually in.
There's been a few questions around your personal experiences with microaggressions and barriers and what you did to overcome those experiences in order to have a seat at the table. Would any of you be willing to share some of those lessons learned?
Sure, I would. So, I've had many experiences. I'm sure all of us can talk about a litany of things that we've experienced. But I've had, it took me a long time to really find my voice. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, that they feel that they have to kind of be a certain level of seniority before they can speak up and talk about certain issues. So, when I was first starting in my career, the first maybe 5 years, it was hard for me to kind of confront people when there were kind of blatant microaggressions or things happening. I think I, started to gain more of the confidence and my voice and speak up. And so I know specifically on one occasion, someone that was in leadership of the firm had asked me in a public setting if I got into Harvard legitimately. And, it was, I was taken back as well. And
sorry, I had to just take a moment on that one.
And I went and confronted them. I did it where, I was a one-on-one conversation, but the person apologized. I told them, this is not appropriate. And the person addressed it, and we had a great relationship going forward. So I think that a lot of times it's difficult for people to find that voice. But I think it's important to use it. In that's the only way that we're going to start to change some of the behaviors that currently exist within the workplace.
I agree with that, Mandy. I think I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard from folks remark how articulate I am, or how whatever it might be. And for some people, what I think is that all these sort of microaggressions are sort of just a death by 1,000 paper cuts. And what I try to tell everyone, and what I try to tell myself more particularly, is that those slights are not about you. You are great. You are amazing. And it's more about them. And often for people of color who know how many challenges and barriers that we have to overcome, we are often sort of the most sort of like smartest people in the room. I'm going to be very frank, because we know we had to overcome and we had to work twice as hard and be twice as good at every opportunity. And I hope anyone who's going through a situation like that, just know that you are good, that you bring a lot to the table. And if this group of people can't see it, you have to find another group of people who will.
When I face those situations, I, depending upon the circumstance, I will use those moments as teachable moments. And if I can do that, I will actually turn the question back around to them, because sometimes you have to allow people to hear what they say. And sometimes when you just repeat what they said, they then can actually have that 3 or 5 seconds to actually process and say, well, maybe I shouldn't have said what I said. That's one approach that I've taken, and it's actually been quite effective. The second is, again, depending upon the situation, I will actually look for allyship in that moment. And if there are folks in the meeting with me who I would expect to be able to either stand up, say something, acknowledge that they heard what I heard, that's where I look to allyship and look for, it doesn't even have to be another senior leader. It could be a colleague in the same meeting. And if they didn't, then I would actually perhaps use it as an opportunity to say, did you hear what I hear? And again, just ask them so that if anything, they can be more mindful when you hear something that comes along this way, please be empowered to be able to speak up. So it's not only me that has to actually acknowledge what I heard, but then it also will help give a signal to the rest of the folks in the room or in that conversation that that's not okay. And it's not up to me or the other person of color to say something in the moment, but there are going to be other allies in the room who also heard what you said, and they will also address it in the moment or address it appropriately. So I think I've found that those tactics work quite well, again, and it depends upon the situation.
I often think about, what am I trying to accomplish in the situation? Did the comment come from someone who is just so far off and sort of derisive that it would not be helpful to head-to-head approach it? Is my response one that I'm actually directing to the individuals in the middle, and I'm actually trying to empower them, up their game, engage them? Or is it just a day where I just can't take it anymore? And when I do the cost benefit, my mental health means that I actually need to say something.
Well said. We all have those days. Maybe just, I know we've got just a few more minutes left, and as we think about, there's been so many great questions. There's been a few on what advice would folks have, and maybe Monica, you might start here, in terms of giving advice to organizations about setting specific goals on D&I and how to communicate those goals to the rest of the organization. Just any guidance from this group on that?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it's just to know your organization. Until you know like where you have your gaps and your challenges, and you can accept the realities in terms of what your starting point is. I think that's the first step, is acknowledging that, Roger, we have a problem. And let's also understand, now that we know we have a problem, what is our starting point? And then how are we actually going to address it? And what's going to be that level of commitment and accountability that will start at the top? I will leave the rest for my panelists to answer. But I think knowing that you have a problem and knowing your starting point is important.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I think that in startup world, with these startups doing really interesting, amazing things and solving big problems, sometimes it's hard to imagine that for a lot of these organizations, they have underinvested on the human resources side of it. So, you know, while a company may have really sophisticated analytics for everything business-wise, it actually doesn't have that for its people. So I completely agree with Monica. You know, the first step is, you know, do we even know what our employees look like, and in what, you know, job levels, in what orgs, what is the breakdown? Like, so many people don't have that visibility, and they're so quick to want to commit to a goal that then doesn't have any sort of teeth behind it. So while we are trying to solve for that at DoorDash right now, one of the things we've actually done is bring it down to the individual level. So if I can go out on a limb based on my experiences, what I've seen so far is companies will be quick to set company-wide goals that then falls on the responsibility of your, head of D&I, but then you need everybody across the organization to be moving to the same drumbeat in order to reach that goal. But because of the lack of infrastructure, a lot of people then feel like, well, it's not on me, or, how do I do that if I don't have the visibility to X, Y, Z, and the request keeps coming? So what we've done at DoorDash is 3 things. The goals that we're setting right now is 1, having a D&I track record to every promotion that is to a director and above. So this has actually been really influential in some of the calibration conversations that we've had with any of these promotions. The second is actually tying it to performance ratings as well. So at DoorDash, we do have performance ratings, and in order for you to receive a exceeds expectation or exceptional, you also have to have a D&I track record. And the last thing that we're rolling out is in our sort of unique offer approval process for new hires, starting with our directors and above, we're saying that before any of your hire requests can be approved, you need to demonstrate that you have interviewed for a diverse slate. So again, bringing it down to the individual level now is requiring every single person, right? Because I think at the end of the day, we're driven by incentives to think about, how does this matter for me if folks are missing that moral imperative to do this work?
So I wish we had so much more time to continue the dialogue, but alas, probably everybody's next Zoom meeting is awaiting. I would just wanted to say to you, Lisa, Monica, Rachel, Melissa, and Mandy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your perspective and your challenges in today's conversation. If I were to summarize, I would say exhilarated by the moment that we're in and the opportunity to make for a different outcome, exhausted because we're in a moment and we can't let go of it and we have to keep pushing every single day to get where we want to be. But hopeful that all of this will yield a different outcome. Thank you so much for your really inspirational stories and perspectives.
Thank you for moderating.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you, ladies. This has been such a, I'm almost wanting this conversation to continue for the next hour or two. We have so many other folks that have asked questions, and what we'll make the commitment to do is to make sure that these questions do get answered. So we'll have our team send these questions back out to you, Sarah, and to the folks, and then we'll take some time to be able to continue the conversation. Thank you again so much. I'm struck by, I was writing furiously, but some of the stuff, Mandy, yours in particular, when you talked about the fact that you're afraid that at this moment in time, we have that attention and we have that focus, but it will dissipate. And so you're working harder and everybody is working harder. So that exhaustion and that exhilaration is coming in real time. And I want to bring Susan back into the conversation because she has really been a leader around a lot of this work. And I want her to kind of give her comments and thoughts, and then we're going to wrap up. And I apologize, folks, we are going a little bit longer, but I do think this conversation is so important. So Susan, I'd love you to come back and make some final comments.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. This is probably one of the best panels that I have heard. And I want to just send my appreciation to all of you. I was like furiously typing the whole time, trying to get all that content. And I consider myself more experienced than others, but just a couple of things that really hit me. The whole issue of taking care of ourselves, creating boundaries for self-care. I think that might be maybe the most important thing, because we all are feeling so inundated and so burdened. And then we're asked to be in charge of all these initiatives to change and to address some of the biggest problems known to mankind. So the idea of self-care is really important. I love the idea of like looking at your own self-limitations, because we have been on a steady diet of inferiority forever. And so for us, we have kind of absorbed that without our knowledge. And I think the idea of looking at your own limitations and just stopping it and not listening to that voice in our head was also really great advice. You really gave the audience a great idea of what kinds of things tactically we should be doing within our organizations. Know your audience, know your environment, have real goals with real teeth, make individuals and organizations and departments accountable. And I love the concept of making sure that it's not just going to be about you as an individual leader who is making the change, because if you leave, everything stops. The idea of embedding this work broadly is really important, and making it everyone's responsibility to do something about it. And I really thought your ideas around how to address microaggressions, difficult conversations, these really specific real life scenarios that we're all faced with, and your advice was just excellent. So I just want to thank you for helping me, arming me with the things that I'm going to use real time to be able to address some of these very, very daunting problems. So best wishes to you all, and thank you. And I hope we can all keep in touch.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you to the panel. And thank you, Sarah, for your excellent work around the moderating. I will leave us with this, a quote from Monica: "A closed mouth does not get fed." Love that. A closed mouth does not get fed. Thank you, ladies. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we have a little bit more to go. I want to bring Sheryl back into the conversation, but we are going to award the folks that have stayed on the call our Southwest airline ticket, EPAP. And so I'm going to introduce Karen Price Ward, who is the Community Outreach Regional Leader for Southwest Airlines. So Karen, if you're on, let's get this party going.
Yes, hello, and wow to all of our panelists. They were wonderful, courageous, so inspiring. So I just give you a big applause. And thank you for the opportunity. I just want to quickly share with you the Southwest Promise and let you know that when you are ready to travel, Southwest Airlines is ready to have you, and we look forward to having you. We are doing many things to keep you safe, and we call that the Southwest Promise. We are employing very stringent cleaning and physical distancing practices to support the well-being of our employees and also our customers. We're using electrostatic and antimicrobial spray treatments. We're cleaning our aircraft each evening. We also are cleaning in between flights. And so we just want to reassure you that we are here for you to have a sense of confidence when you are ready to travel. And we have committed not to book the middle seat at least until October 31st. We do have a special airline ticket to give away today, and this ticket has no it has no restrictions on it. It has no blackout dates, and we hope that you will enjoy getting away. So without further ado, I believe today's lucky winner is Karen Dunn of DART. And Karen, if you are with us, please use your chat button and let us know that you are here. Okay, I believe, have you been identified? Do we have Karen? Okay, if not, let's move to the next person. Erica Trilogia with Crossroads. Erica, are you with us? If so, please use your chat button. I'll give you just a little bit of time. Erica with Crossroads. Okay, well, there's still an opportunity to win because we're going to go to the third part. Oh, do we have her? Okay, no. Erica Montalongo with Union Bank. Erica with Union Bank, are you with us? If so, please use your chat button. Oh, wonderful, Erica. Congratulations. We see through the chat button that you are here, and congratulations. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I'm going to let my good friend Sheryl Tong have the last word. This has been a remarkable series, Sheryl. The four, this one, I think we saved one of the best for last. And I just want to say thank you to you and to your leadership and to your organization And again, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sheryl Tong, for the last word. Thank you.
Pat, thank you. What a wonderful panels for the past 4 weeks. You know, the inspiration, conversation, the positive message, this is a way we can get together because it's just like, you know, it's very, very difficult during this pandemic. We don't know about our future, especially as a woman, we puzzle what's going to happen, our family, the health, and our work, everything. But thank you for, you know, all the panelists. Thank you for all the participant sponsor. Your time and expertise is very, very critical to the success to this kind of panel and also encourage women of the color to the table. I learned so much just for the past 1 hour, and I just want to quote some of our panelists' words. Nothing will change overnight, but we have to match our hope with action. We need to have a commitment. We need to develop strategies. We should humanize the organization and always challenging ourselves. We are not only to the table, but we also have to move women of color to the higher position. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate our co-host, California Asian Chamber, Minority Business Development Agency, Enterprise Women of Color. Last but not least, you're the one, all the participants, you're the one we're here. We have met some of you last year when we hope to see you next year. Just as one of the panelists, Lisa, mentioned, we should find the time to spend with the people we love. I think this is the critical time. We think about the people. We have to dedicate so much time to the work. We have to think about the people we really love. This is not easy, but because of this kind of event, we can be united and move forward. So I wish all of you stay safe and healthy, and I will see you next year. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you. Thank you, Sheryl. Bye-bye.